So we're jumping into the God tier missions here, starting with life, aspiring for godhood, the ascension to the very gods themselves. And in this mission, essentially you have a center mass of God tiers, and then based on who loses the round, more God tiers are added. They get to add them depending on the dice roll and depending on the starting amount. So literally what we see by life, it gets to grow over the course of the mission. And the idea is that with God tier being balanced and having the flow back and forth, the player that loses the round, they've lost the points on the tier, but now through positioning, perhaps they can leverage that in their favor to begin next round. So I find the games with life playing that mission to be very dynamic, and even if you're trailing by a little bit, getting that momentum next turn. So truly, you're never really fully knocked out. Now, the first thing I want to say, being an introductory type mission and being a centralized mission, Slayer warbands tend to have an advantage. I mean, essentially, even as you move through turn 2, turn 3, if it plays to turn 4, if it plays to turn 5, the mass of tiers is going to grow, but you have that central mass. It just forces everyone to gang up and smash on each other. And of course, it's a little more dynamic than that, throwing around combos, doing pushbacks, and exploring it from that perspective. But by their very nature of Slayers getting the bonus for knocking out champions, and on average looking at Rangosh or Sneaky Pete and the Sneaksters dealing a lot of damage, it's a target-rich environment. You have a lot of targets. So it's different than some of the other missions where the tiers might be spread out, exploring an idea like Half Tusk, camping in the back, or dividing up your warbands. You're centralizing everything in that location. So what that means is if you know you're playing that mission ahead of time, and there's no right or wrong with this, you might want to look at warbands, the reds or the yellows, because they can put out more direct damage. They can put out more alpha. I will say on a side note, when I'm playing with my friends, I ask, hey, is there a mission that you want to play ahead of time? And maybe we'll tailor our warbands for that. Most of the time, the way we play is a draft system. We roll to see who picks first. You pick your warband. I pick one of my warbands. You pick yours. I pick mine, back and forth until we have the roster filled out. And honestly, if you really want to play someone, then you know what? Play them. Or if there's a combo you want to try, play them. We're going to do our best to win, but having fun and having a dynamic game is really focus and what's important to me, in opinion. And then we roll randomly for mission. Maybe you go all in and say, look, I'm going to go all Slayers, all mono build, and we need to explore some advantages with that. You roll up life, you're ready to go. Or maybe it's a mission that you're not favored. But in life, it does favor those. This mission placement is key. The two things that I like to try and keep in mind, that I like to do and plan for, or if my opponent is placing, asking the question based on the warband, what's the plan against this? You start to see the tiers trail back to your opponent's deployment zone. What this means is if they have the center mass of 4 tiers and then a trail of 2, can't go into their own deployment zone, you can have a champion planted, plant the banner on one of the far tiers, and then run into the fray of the central mass. It makes banner planting a lot more important and making that claim action. I mean, that's critical. It's potentially 4 points. Depending on the type of champion, you might get that +1 bonus. That's big. That's massive. So being able to have some tiers in the back that you can farm out, that's a strategy that you can do. And at the same time, that's a strategy that you have to be prepared for with your opponent. Now, there are also times, if you roll enough as they evolve out and you place enough tiers, where you can encircle followers. You can encircle minions. You can't stop a champion. Can't stop the Froglotites. Can't stop Kira's young dragons, because they can fly over. But for the rest of us, if you get stuck, that's kind of a nice way to take out certain followers, especially if they attack in the movement phase. If you're looking at the Golden Shrikes from Gene, or you're looking at the Sneaksters, Sneaky Pete, they activate potentially out of turn during that movement phase, which means if I win before you even move, I can move up and kind of hit you with the mini alpha strike. If you can encircle one or two of those followers or a group, that's big. That takes them out, and I'm kind of in that, or your opponent is kind of in that limbo area. You can't regen, you can't recruit, you can't get rid of them. What do you do? So that's not necessarily something to plan for because the tiers evolve dynamically. But if you lose a round and the positioning is such and you roll and you got a stack of 3 tiers based on how the hexes connect and based on that central mass of 4, you could very easily do that. Another way to manipulate the tiers is what's called a refused flank. A refused flank in wargaming, really quick, is if we have the gaming table, if I put my units, and in this case maybe it's tanks, infantry, whatever it's going to be, if I put my units in the center of the table, you can attack me on the left side, the right side, or straight on. Refused flank is where I take all of my units and I push them over to one side of the table. So maybe I push them all over to my right side of the table. What this means is you can't attack from that side. I'm refusing that flank. I'm limiting the areas that you can attack. Refused flank kind of works in life in that we're moving up to that center massive tiers. Champions are doing what they got to do. Minions, followers are maybe moving to the left or to the right side. Maybe you break up. Maybe you stay together as a group. There's advantages or disadvantages to both, especially if you're playing 3 or more warbands or a custom warband amount. But a refused flank could be where if I can place 3 tiers and I go either on the left or the right side, 1, 2, 3, straight across, build a line. Essentially, any minions that you have over on that side, it's now going to take you longer to cross around those tiers. Or if you say, okay, look, I'm going to run back to the other side, that's going to cost you a turn of movement, and some units move faster than others, but you're going to burn some of that movement as opposed to being able to cut that corner quickly. So I mention that because if you can't encircle, and it's a lot of fun to do that, but it presents itself when it presents itself, 100% you can build a refused flank and play from it from that perspective. So exploring the life mission, a great starter mission. I think it works out really well because it just gets things into the mix. There's a lot of excitement, but it is kind of rush to the center, brawl it out, and furiously roll lots and lots of dice. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm glad that the other missions, as they evolve out and as we explore them, and we're going to explore them and help build that Tactica checklist, you begin to see how dynamic the game becomes. And while killy and doing the killy is important, by far with Godtear, it is not the only thing.